When I first bought my ND Miata, I was thrilled with its performance. Not only was it fun to drive, but it was also great as a daily driver. However, over time, and as I got used to its handling characteristics, I was left wondering, how far does the Miata modification hole go? And so I pursued this journey of modifying the suspension on my car, the rims, the tires, and overall converting my ND Miata into a track beast. Now there was one thing I left on the table, and that was the sway bar. And there's a good reason for that. You see, with the ND Miatas, to install the sway bar was really quite cumbersome, and going from my ND Miata, I bought it totaled actually, and I completely rebuilt it. I'll throw the link to that video I made earlier right now. However, I was kind of done with the car. I dropped the transmission, I did so much work, I had to drop the subframe on the car, so I was like, oh my god, the job of this sway bar is going to be so much. But eventually, I got around to doing it. And in this video, I want to talk to you guys about this modification. Is it worth the hassle? Was it worth the performance I got? Let's dive into it. And I actually brought some props with me this time. See this? What do you guys think this is? This is actually my front sway bar that I had to rip out. And you might be wondering, why did I cut my sway bar in half? I can't put it back now, but there's also a great reason for that. And so the first thing we should talk about is what sway bars did I get for this car. Now, there are a ton of options out there for sway bars for the ND Miata. However, I settled on one for a particular reason, and it is the Goodwin Racing sway bars. These sway bars come in a pair. I'll shoot a link in the description for you guys to check out. And it's the mid-range. There are a couple more expensive ones. I believe Karcepts creates a more expensive sway bar. However, I kind of opted for a middle ground option that was not too expensive, but also expensive enough to make it worth the purchase, because what's the point of buying a cheap sway bar that performs worse? This sway bar ran me about $450. That is the front and back. Let me actually turn the wheel over so you guys can check it out. I'll sneak you guys down in here. It's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see it right down there, the new ones, and it's adjustable. You see that link? We can move it up and down in theory. In practice, I have the Koni shocks, and you see how close that link is to my shock? I can't move that up. So I'm really locked to the far out setting on the sway bar, which means it's set to a full soft. Here's a little bit better view for you guys. You can see that beefy sway bar in there now. And so, all right, I got the Goodwin Racing sway bars. Now, how was the installation? Well, it was quite a pain in the ass. As we see here, this is my old front sway bar that is cut in half. You can actually see the hollow inside of a sway bar, which is nice. You may be wondering, why the hell did I cut this? Well, for the front sway bar, it is very tight for tolerances, and especially because my ND Miata is turbocharged, it is very tight down there. So I also have an oil cooler with oil lines, which also complicate it further. Let me pop the hood and show you guys. But here's the oil line for the turbo, and if really nestled down there, we do have big, thick oil cooler lines that just make it such a tight process down there. Had to remove my turbo pipes, had to drop the radiator a little bit. I think technically you have to drop the whole radiator and drain the fluid, but I said hell no to that, and that ended up causing me to have to drop the steering column. I actually had to loosen the steering column, shift it out of the way so that it kind of drops down, which allows more room for the sway bar to be shifted out. And it's kind of like navigating a complicated key, as like, check it out, here's my rear sway bar. It's not a straight bar, there's this indentation here that goes in, so you kind of have to twist and finagle it out like that, which makes it a lot more frustrating. Overall, the front sway bar took me about, give or take, 3 hours, 4 hours to do. Not a fun job. As we all know, us car guys know, there's fun jobs and there's not fun jobs. I would rate this job as a not very fun job. However, the rears were chill. It was not much at all. It took me maybe about 10 minutes to do. Let me get you down under there so you can see. Honestly, my best recommendation to you guys, if you're going to get a sway bar, just stick to the manufacturer's instructions. I followed Goodwin Racing's instructions to a T, and it ended up working out quite well. And obviously, if you need to bend a couple rules here and there, maybe move the steering column in a different manner to help you out, you know, you got to do what you got to do. Now, there's also another thing I want to bring to you guys, is that if you do opt for the more expensive option by Karcepts, I think they want $800 for their sway bar. I think that's just for the front as well. Quite pricey, but they offer a 3-piece kit so that, let me show you right here. It's split into 3 pieces. You have the straight line, or the straight bar, and then you have this kind of connection, and there's a link here, so you don't have to, it's a much easier process to install. So, and that's probably why it's more expensive. All right, so I talked to you guys about what sway bar I got, how much it was, how hard it was to install. Let's talk about the performance now. So when I first installed the sway bars, I was actually pretty disappointed. It did not handle as well as it did before, and I was wondering, why is this? And I started looking into it. What I would have is actually an oversteer effect. So if I'm taking a corner really quickly, I'll feel the rear tire just wanting to kick out. So it was always a constant battle of, can I prevent that rear end from just flying out? And then with the traction control on these Miatas are kind of lackluster, if I'm going to be honest. It could be because I have 235 Nitto NT05 tires all around, plus different rims. So TC might be a little bit confused, like, hey, this is not the stock setting, what's going on here? That could be a reason, but it's just the TC will just want to kick, like, it just grabs you. It's not as sophisticated as I want it to be, but to be fair, it's a Miata. I'm turning this thing into a track monster, so it's hard for me to be picky here. But anyways, I would have this oversteer, and with that lackluster TC, it was just kind of a disaster. So I was researching into it. I first tried to soften, as I have my conies right here. You can see right here, nice adjustable shocks. I can do a video on that as well. But I would start by stiffening up the fronts and loosening the rears, and that kind of helped, but I didn't like the idea of the whole setup being imbalanced. So what I ended up doing, I was going on a vacation, and I set everything to soft, just because I want to have a smooth ride. And I took it around the canyons next time. The car was handling really well. And it got me thinking, when I initially installed the sway bar, I had my shocks on full stiff because I was trying to compensate somewhat for my soft stock sway bar. So I think that by putting on the stiffer sway bar, it gave me the ability to soften up my shocks, which improved the ride quality. So that was an interesting benefit from installing these sway bars, is that it allows me to run softer shock rates, which leads to a smoother ride, but I also get that grip benefit, which I'll talk about right now. How did it perform? After I softened everything, way better. Way better. When I was going around the corners, you can feel the car much more planted. The best way I can put it is that the car just felt way more confident around the turns. I wouldn't have that any kind of jerky response or unpredictability that was on the stock sway bars, as the car would be hunched all the way over to one side with the suspension fully depressed on one side. So if you hit a bump, you're going to have the car kind of bounce a little bit, which is really not fun. The stiffer sway bars give you that option, so when we're taking the corner, we still have some play in the suspension, or at least more play, that allows for a much smoother ride. That was really apparent when I got these new sway bars. Where we have the connection to the main sway bar that goes to the control arm, it's not really adjustable. There are 3 holes that you can move it up and down, but I believe you have to buy Goodwin Racing's endlinks for the sway bar, and I think they're about $100 maybe. So, and that, I believe that gives you the flexibility to move it around. It's pretty much locked on one setting if you're having the stock endlinks. So just something to keep in mind. $450 might be $550 if you want to really have that adjustability. After resolving my oversteering issue by just softening the shocks all around to fully soft, haven't really felt a need to kind of play around with that sway bar stiffness. It's pretty good as is. I have it on full soft on the front, and I believe I have full soft on the rears as well. Let me check. Yep, full soft on the rears, just checked. So full soft setting, it's pretty nice. It is definitely stiffer than OEM. I would give it maybe 40% stiffer. It's really hard for me to say. It's more if you feel the difference. I can't really quantify it to you guys. I could take the corners a little bit quicker. It gives me that headroom where when I would originally feel like, oh, I could take this corner at this speed, 80 miles an hour, I'd go through it at 83. I'm like 85 maybe. I'm like, wow, this car still has a little bit more it can give. It makes it much more confident is the best way I can put it. Now, was it worth the $500 with shipping and tax? what do you do with the car? How modified is it already? As you can see, this car, we got Willwoods up front. Made a video on that. We got fat, sticky tires, Advanti Storm S1 rims. I got a turbo in this thing. You know, it's kind of a logical progression since my car is already heavily modified. Would I recommend it as an initial mod? Get some better tires. I'd probably say upgrade the brake pads next. After brake pads, I'd probably say get bigger rims so you can rock wider tires. As stock, you're running 205s, 195 on the sports, which is crazy. So get bigger rims that could fit 235s all around. And then at that point, I think you can consider getting a better sway bar. I think that progression, and if you're somewhere around there that I described, if you want to modify it, get that sway bar. Oh, also, yeah, I'd recommend getting a sway bar before you upgrade the shocks. I think from what I've researched online, it's better to do that. You want to cure the body roll in this Miata. It is crazy when it was stock. Getting new shocks and springs definitely helped out, but that sway bar, I think, really sealed the deal. When you're going around these corners, you need that play so that your suspension is not fully bottomed out. I mean, just for reference, look at how bendy this sway bar is. It's such a flimsy piece of metal. It's kind of funny. So I tried that with the Goodwin Racing sway bars. It would not bend much at all. So really, that was a necessary upgrade. And that's gonna do it for today's video. If you guys got some value from this, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll see y'all later.